are recording the webinar. So just so that we have a record of it, and for those who want to relook at it, as I will show slides and we'll do some activities. So if you want to go back, you can go back. It will be on a YouTube channel. So and I'll send out all the links here at a later date. So first and foremost, I do see some familiar names, but my name is Kyle McDonald. I'm a mental performance consultant with Maple Leaf Junior Tour, and kind of with a variety of organizations. Most notably, I'm the lead mental performance consultant with our national para ice hockey team as we prepare to achieve gold in Beijing in 2022. Besides that, I work with the Sport Medicine Council of Saskatchewan, the Canadian Sports Psychology Association, and a variety of other organizations as performance initiatives and stuff like that. So I currently work with right around 30 athletes in a variety of sports, but most notably, probably 60 to 70% of my business is within the hockey and golf industry. So that's kind of my background. I teach at the University of Regina, and teach 3 classes: a leadership class, an intro to sport and exercise psych, and a coaching theory class as well. So before I became a mental performance consultant, I coached hockey for a number of years as I completed my master's, and still kind of continue to work on my PhD in and around psychological profiling of athletes, as well as youth development and how we integrate mental skills. So as far as tonight, I'm going to talk for, I don't want to lecture you. I know some of you might be done school, and I have some questions, so make sure you have something to write with. You won't have to share, but we will go through those questions as we make our way through the night. And my goal is to kind of give you a little bit of glimpse and maybe kind of help you out. So without further ado, I'll share my screen here as we get rolling. So our topic tonight is the unavoidable aspects of golf, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. We'll establish some aspects that are unavoidable in your game. We'll discuss perspective and what it can do for mentality. I'll talk about, with athletes that I've worked with before, how they perceive some unavoidable aspects are. I'll talk about the cycle. I'll talk about how you build your mental game to help you deal with some of those unavoidable things, and then we'll talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and identity as well tonight. So based off of what we had when you registered for this webinar, and there's some mistakes in here, but you can see some of the key themes that you guys talked about when I asked the question about what would you like to hear about in this webinar. And a lot of people, you can see in the bigger words: pressure, nerves, how we stay focused, mentality, competition, playing after bad shots, and hopefully I fit all those key themes into tonight and what we're doing here. So I'm going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes here, and I'm going to ask you to write down what you believe are your top 5 aspects that are unavoidable. What are things that you can't avoid in golf? When you tee it up and you go out to play, whether it's a competition or just a normal day, what are 5 things that are going to happen out on the golf course for you? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to answer that question. Okay. So I won't ask anyone to share, but most of the time when I ask this question about, and really it follows any sport, what are unavoidable? Usually the answer leans toward the negative. And so sometimes we talk a lot about kind of mistakes or getting frustrated or feeling pressure or nerves. And tonight I want to talk to you about all those feelings are normal, and you're never going to walk away from a golf course without feeling them. And so we all have tendencies to move towards, if we feel pressure, if we feel nerves, or whatever the case may be. But this is a great example of a couple weeks back, Jordan Spieth's scorecard. And it's amazing when you see he tripled, he started on the back nine, he tripled bogey number 12, but then came back with a birdie. And so when we talk about mistakes and we talk about bad holes, and if you really dig into PGA Tour and LPGA Tour stats, we all have bad holes, even the pros. The difference is their bounce back ability. And so what they do after that bad hole, where with a lot of amateur golfers, when we have a bad mistake or something happens, that tends to snowball on us. And so the whole idea tonight is not to suppress or take away those unavoidable and those negative things. We're all going to have thoughts. We're all going to have things that happen to us. But how do we create a structure to make sure that we bounce back for them? So I know with the MJT, things are starting to heat up right now with competition and tournaments. And so at the end of the day, we're going to feel more pressure. We might feel pressure because we don't have as many tournaments as we did 4, 5, 6 months ago when we were planning. And so therefore, that's going to add kind of some of those nerves. And at the end of the day, everyone, you're going to hit bad shots. And so the whole idea behind mental skills is not negating the bad shots, but learning how to manage them a whole lot quicker, right? And so, oh, I'm having trouble sharing here. Sorry, everybody. Oops. So when we think about these things, a lot of it has to do with our perspective, right? And so it's amazing when we look into a round, and I'm going to talk about how you look into a round with a different perspective without attaching your identity to the outcome. And so perspective when we play is a big thing to make sure that we unavoid those things. And when we have perspective, we really play a big part into our identity and what we're thinking about. So, at the end of the day, for as far as tonight, this is when we gain perspective, this is all about thought patterns. And when I say that is as you can tell, if you look up at the first picture, you know what the thought pattern is, the middle finger is up. But if we do a 360 and look at a different angle, he's holding 3 fingers up, right? And it's no different than golf. If our perspective is, I suck at golf because I bogeyed 10, I double bogeyed 11, and then I triple bogeyed 12, yes, there's no doubt that's a hard process to go through. But if we attach our whole identity to those 3 holes, we're missing a lot of perspective on the other 15 holes that we went through. And so part of building your repertoire and building your identity and building your mentality is to kind of dig a little bit more into that idea of perspective and looking at more than just the scorecard, right? The end of the day, as I said, the most unavoidable aspect is you're going to go through adversity in a golf game, right? But the counter to that is to have a strong structure. And so I'm going to give you just a couple minutes here just to kind of read this poem. And then so just read it. So you're going to read it from the top down and then read it from the bottom up. So once again, perspective, right? And so when the tough part about golf is that you're out there for 4 hours and there's a lot of things that are happening. And so we need to find ways to gain perspective, because you're never going to avoid the adversity, but you can train your mentality and you can train your mindset of how you're going to deal with that. And hopefully tonight I give you some of those ideas. So in my eyes, and in athletes that I work with, the most common themes about the unavoidable, and there's some good here, is that a lot of my golfers will talk about, hey, I'm going to hit some good shots. For sure, I'm going to hit some good shots. But their mentality and thought process around that is only about 20%. Where they really get stuck is they start thinking a lot about bad shots and the pressure that those bad shots create. So if you think about it, if you put a number to it, the golfers that I work with spend 60% of their time thinking about pressure and bad shots. So no wonder it snowballs, because we're talking about things, right? And then the other kind of 20%, they talk a lot about critiquing. So that own self-talk about, they always are hard on themselves and they worry about what others are thinking about them. And then that creates some type of uncertainty. So if you take a look at this kind of idea, they're thinking 4 out of 5 things is negative. And so what do you expect out of your golf round if 4 out of 5 things or 80% of your time is spent on the negative, right? And that's where we need to restructure our thought process, right? And so this is what usually happens to us in a golf round. We make a mistake, create some type of anxiety, maybe some stress, et cetera, et cetera. And then what's the first thing we always go to? The first thing we always go to is technical, right? So we make a mistake, creates anxiety. I'm going to go to the range and I'm going to fix it after the round, or I'm going to go out and talk to my golf instructor and fix it, right? We always go to the technical. And why do we go to the technical? Because we're always chasing on course technical perfection, right? And so those expectations lead us to connect our identity to outcomes. I'm a good player if I hit good shots. Well, you can still be a good player even if you hook it out of bounds, but your process was good. And the tough part about all of that stuff is that we tie a lot of emotions to the outcomes, right? And so we make a mistake, anxiety happens, we look at the technical aspect, we're trying to chase perfection, then all of a sudden our thought patterns change. This sucks, I suck, this isn't happening for me, and this is where the snowball happens. Then we make another mistake, anxiety sets in, it just keeps on going on and on and on. This is the cycle that we get in, and I'm sure all of you have been in it. It may not happen for 18 holes, but you maybe hit a rough spot for 10 to 11, 12, where all of a sudden there's more expectations on you. And so maybe a little bit of fear starts coming in, but we've all lived this cycle. And the goal from a mental performance standpoint is that the cycle is going to happen, but how quick can we stop the cycle, right? We're going to make mistakes. We're going to feel anxiety. We're going to try and chase perfection. But if that's creating the wrong types of emotions and feelings, then you're probably not optimizing your performance as good as you can, right? So just a couple thoughts here. We make mistakes on the course, right? And we think that that is bad as opposed to part of our journey, right? A lot of time when I work with my golfers, a lot of our conversations are around the idea that, hey, mistakes are going to happen to us. That's part of our journey, right? And so we want to make sure that that good or bad, that's part of our fabric, right? That's part of our identity, okay? The other thing that happens to a lot of young golfers is that we start thinking, we see the Tiger Woods and the Serena Williams in tennis, and we see all these outliers out there that are superb athletes, and we create this identity of them, and we think that they don't have nerves or they don't think like that, right? And that's not correct. When in reality, that is a story of perfectionism. You're creating that on your own. There's a great interview with Tiger Woods on Golf TV about that he feels nervous, and an even better one by the lady of the name of Michaela Schifrin, who's a skier, who talks about the doubt she has at the top of the ski hill, right? Those doubts, those things that are unavoidable, the adversity, the stress, those are all part of our journey, right? So when we discuss it, and a lot of golfers come to me and they say, well, I just want to forget about it. I just want to forget about it. Once again, we're creating perfectionism again. We're creating that perfectionist approach that increases pressure. You're not just going to forget about it, right? Or the other thing, things start going really well, and you start feeling, hey, I'm swinging free. I need to maintain that somehow. Once again, perfectionism and pressure, okay? the end of the day, avoidance is not the answer. And when I say avoidance, is you can't avoid the feelings. You can't avoid those types of aspects when you get into that cycle. You need to acknowledge it and try and find a way to move forward. And hopefully tonight we kind of give you an idea of that. Okay. Adversity is always going to be there, and this is okay. Okay. And the funny thing about adversity is that we tend to talk about adversity and living through adversity until we're actually in adversity, and then we don't really like it. So sitting here tonight, I'm sure a lot of you have said, you know what, yeah, adversity, you know, I can deal with that. But then you're in it, and when we're in it, we're emotional. And you know, when we're emotional, then we're not thinking about our identity, we're not thinking about principles, right? And so part of the conversation tonight is this idea of resiliency. And the idea of resiliency is the capacity to deal with stress, pressure, and challenge. We have to find ways to deal with those mistakes and manage those mistakes. We need to recover quickly from difficulties, right? We need to find a positive adjustment to stressful events, okay? And the big one for me is you move through the stress with your identity. If you don't know the type of player you are, it is very hard to move through those unavoidable aspects, okay? So with that said, part of our journey, especially as young athletes, is that you move through this adversity because you're tending to grow and you're tending to develop resources to deal with that. But if you haven't spent any time on your mentality and your mindset, then it becomes very, very difficult to increase that toolbox, so to speak, okay? The one greatest thing that I've heard in the last little bit is Trevor Moore, who's written a book called It Takes What It Takes. And he talks about the past does not predict the future unless the behavior doesn't change. So meaning going back to my cycle, you make that mistake, it creates anxiety, you start looking for technical fixes because you're chasing perfection, then all of a sudden those self-depleting thoughts come in. You go make another mistake and you keep going into the cycle. At some point in time, you have to change, you have to kind of change that behavior, and you have to change those ideas of what's happening to you. And usually that's built off of our pre-shot routine and what we're thinking and our thought patterns as we prepare, okay? I'm just gonna show you a quick video here. I just gotta get it queued up. I don't wanna do that. So just a quick video here and keeping in mind this idea of identity and how we deal with certain things. I just think it's such a great interview when we talk about these types of things, right? You're not a golfer because you go out and shoot 76. You're a golfer because you went through a process for the whole day. You've built your identity. And so part of that identity is managing mistakes and managing adversity. And there's no doubt in my mind about those things, right? I'm going to give you a couple minutes here. So when you go out to compete, and what are you building when you compete? So this is a reflection question too that I'll give you a couple minutes. What are you trying to build when you compete? And the answer here isn't to shoot your personal best. What are you trying to build? And it's just like him, you know, one push-up isn't going to put you in shape, but it's going to put you on the right track. And so keep that in mind as you go through when you think about this question. When you go and compete, if you're going to go play tomorrow, what are you trying to build? What are you hoping? What type of habits do you want? Is it to learn how to manage stress better? Is it to have on average only 2 putts instead of 3 putts? What's the goal? What are you trying to build? So I'll give you a minute here to go through that question. Okay. So if you understand what you're building, you're one step closer into managing those unavoidable aspects. So if you're one step closer to that idea, and going back to our video, when you think about building habits, and it's not about running a marathon, it's about becoming a runner, right? You want to become a golfer. And so this is a great quote which ties right into it from a book called The QB. And it's a lot more than just being able to throw the ball. It's all about how you're wired, how you work. 1,000 kids can throw the ball, but it's the intangibles that separate you. How we deal with adversity, how we manage ourselves through a golf course, what our self-awareness is like, all those things play a big difference. And if you're digging into those things, that's a huge aspect, right? One of the other aspects is when we were trying to build this stuff, right? So going right back to the question here, believe you can experience any thought and still come back to the present. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are nervous going on to that first tee. That's okay. Don't try and I just need to forget about it. Once again, you're adding pressure, you're adding perfectionism, right? Accept the thought, hey, I'm nervous today because this is important to me, right? But here's what I'm going to do off the first tee. I'm going to clear my shoulders. I'm going to make sure I make good impact. I'm going to swing free, whatever the self-talk looks like for you, right? It's the same thing when you have a must-hit tee shot, right? And you don't want to miss. Accept the thought that you don't want to miss. Don't try and suppress it. Hey, I'd really like to get the ball in the fairway. What are my principles to get this ball in the fairway? That's what you want to start talking about, right? So the big part of this, if we want to get out of the cycle, is not to connect your shots with other shots, right? And the best part of all this is that positive self-talk frees us up from and negativity adds tension. So if you're sitting there saying, I can't miss this tee shot, you're adding tension. You're not priming yourself. You're not motivating yourself. You're priming it, right? And there's a great article from Leaders in Sports about Jordan Spieth and his coach. And at the bottom, it says right there, we measure this by reframing and perspective. It is a reframing opportunity, a sense of perspective, right? This is what we're talking about. And so even those pros are going through that resetting, reframing, stuff like that, okay? Another great example is from the book, What Drives Winning? And that's Steph Curry in the picture there. At the time the picture was taken, he was 0 for 9 on three-pointers. Okay, and you can see the stats on the left there on Friday, November the 4th. He was 0 for 10 in that game. But going 0 for 9, the best part of the story is he still wanted the ball. Yes, he ended up going 0 for 10, but he still wanted the ball. Where a lot of us as amateur athletes, if we're 0 for 9, we're probably saying, I don't want it. If we've had 2 or 3 bad holes, 4 or 5 bad holes, all of a sudden we've decreased the expectations of ourselves and we've stopped the process. The goal for you is when you have that bad hole is to want that ball again or want that hole again, right? And then you can see the next night, 3 nights later, he sets an NBA record. Right? That's sports. You're going to go through the 0 and 10s. And once again, if we don't have that perfectionist mentality, we're going to understand that that's part of our fabric. That's part of Steph Curry's fabric now. He had that night, so now he's gone on to another night and he sets an NBA record. Okay? All of those things go into this idea of athletic identity, right? Understanding, your thoughts and feelings you have about yourself. And I would pose the question, how many of you thought about the thoughts and feelings you have about yourself as an athlete, right? Do you think about those things or do you not think about those things? And I guess that's what I'm trying to get across is that we need to have these types of conversations if we're going to add to our toolbox, right? And then the second part is your athletic identity, the extent to which you identify as an athlete. In my Success in Seclusion course that just wrapped up, we talked a lot about, especially near the tail end, about what type of player are we and what type of golfer are we? What's our style of play? What type of behaviors and principles do we want? Those are how you're gonna counter those nights where you're 0 for 10, but you still want that ball because you're better than that, right? And so Question 3 is just, and you can just jot down what's your style of play. It's something that I talked a lot about in the Success and Seclusion, but at this time, it's no different. And the tough part is, if you don't know what your style of play is, that's where the stress and pressure is going to get you, because you need to find a way to have your principles react, and the habits and actions need to help you push through those times of adversity and stress. Right. So something that I talk a lot with my athletes about is a performance profile. You know, where we are on our focus, where are we on our confidence, you know, what are the technical and tactical things that we're trying to do on the golf course, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. One of the things, some great work here, but you know, if you go through a round or a game, if you're a multi-sport athlete, you're going to go through some of this stuff. Right? In a golf game, you're gonna go through active resistance, and when I say that, you're gonna have poor decision making. You're gonna express anger. You're gonna have a whole bunch of things. You're gonna feel detached at times, right? Unenthused or uninterested, and then you start working your way. You're gonna start questioning, right? So, okay, I'm not playing well. What do I need to do? What's my new process look like, right? And when it says openly question decisions, that's probably that is your self-talk. Okay. And then provide some alternative solutions. If you're not striking it well, maybe going over the water in 2 isn't the best idea on that par 5. So what do I need to do? I want to get it to 100 yards so that I can hit a good wedge in. Right. And so finally, then we're in the acceptance, and the acceptance is enthusiasm. You're showing interest, you're supportive, you're incorporating great ideas, right? Some would say acceptance is pushing your way into the zone. I want my athletes to spend as much time in the question and acceptance. But like I said to you at the start, the cycle we get in, most of my athletes in a round of golf are detached or actively resisting. They're caught up in the pressure. They're caught up in the decision, or into the bad shots. They're caught up into the uncertainty. And we need to find some type of certainty, and how we do that is through our questioning of what's happening and our acceptance as well. Okay. The last reflection question is just think about this, and I'll give you a couple minutes here. In your last round, where do you think you spent most of your round in? Do you think you spent most of it resisting, detached, questioning, acceptance? Maybe you can come back and say, hey, I was in every area. That's fine too. But if you were 25% in the active resistance, what would happen if we created a mindset or mentality to get you into the 20%? You spend only 20% of your time in the active resistance. That might be 1 or 2 shots. That's a big difference at the highest level, right? And so that's where the mental skills and how we deal with the unavoidable. So I'm just going to give you a minute here. Just give it some thought. Where did you spend most of your time in your last round? Okay, just the last couple things here. When we talk about this, is a big part of it is identifying where we're at. Are we questioning? Are we detached? Are we resisting? Right? Great quote on emotional intelligence. It's not the situation itself that triggers a specific emotion, but rather how we personally relate to that situation. So if we relate to it, and I think this is where we get caught up, we feel we're very good golfers, and then we make a triple bogey. All of a sudden, that's taking away that relationship we've built, thinking we're a good golfer, right? That's why emotional intelligence is a skill, and that's why it's the best in the world. That's why the best in the world respond so well. Jordan Spieth knew he was going to come back from that triple bogey, right? And they prepare their emotional systems properly and intentionally. And when we say that, what we're talking about is, you know, you're going to have bad shots. So you prepare yourself and you create a structure, a self-talk based off your identity, how you see yourself, your breathing. You build that into your system so that you know you can manage it, right? And that's the when we talk about EI, self-awareness, self-management, stuff like that, okay? At the end of the day, when we're faced with a setback, we always have a choice, okay? We have more words for negativity. That's why preparation involves so strong self-talk. You're gonna have more words for negativity. We always do it, okay? At the time when stress happens, it is really easy to freeze in the time of stress, right? So think about it. Trauma freezes moments, right? And I'm not comparing trauma with a bad golf shot. They're two kind of different things. But for lack of a better word, trauma, when we go through something bad, freezes us in that moment. Okay. But on the flip side of that, those emotions can be a signal for us to learn, right? And the fear that we might have of not living up to what we see ourselves is a signal that we have to learn how to manage that, right? Okay. The big part for all of us is when we have something bad is to make sure we continue the story. Okay. Learn how to take the moment and move it into competence. Build the story of how you manage the setback. So when you have that setback again, you're able to do it, right? If you're in that negative cycle, you focus on the past, right? Why am I playing? This sucks. I don't like it. Your breathing is off. So your panic is probably induced a little bit and you're stuck on what's wrong. My grips aren't right. I'm not lined up very well, right? Where if you reset properly, you can focus on your self-talk, what's important now. You're aware of your breathing and your patterns, and you move forward with what's ahead. Yes, I've made that triple bogey, but I have 15 holes left to play today. Okay. Sorry. Last couple slides here. So in all of this, at the end of the day, what is possible? So somehow along we have to phase in this idea that we're able to manage it and create strong thought patterns. And so how do we do that? Right? It's in our pre-shot, it's in how we prepare over the ball, it's in our post-shot, and it's in between our shots. So this is an example, and this is quite in depth, but this is of an individual golfer that I've worked with, and this is called the process scorecard or an emotional intelligence scorecard. And there's lots of things that we're looking at here. So instead of just marking down a score, we're trying to dig into the process. So it's amazing how many people talk about the process, and you got to love the process. But then don't watch it and aren't aware of it. And so this is just an example. So you can see on the top line, the par, that's their score there, the next line. And then we start talking about their pre-shot, their post-shot, their result. What was their process like and what type of emotion did they have on the hole? And there's lots of ways you can do this, but for sake of this, we do green light, amber, and red light. And so he felt on, if you just look at hole number 4 here, he felt like his pre-shot was green. He thought his post-shot was good. He thought his result was good, green. He thought his process was very good. And his emotion was happy through the hole, right? And so if you look at this, if you look at the hole before, he had a double bogey. Pre-shot was red, right? Post-shot was red, okay? Lots of things happening here that were red, okay? But he bounced back, okay? Same thing with here, right? He did have a bogey down here, but still talked about his pre-shot, post-shot. That's very results orientated. That's great, okay? I think that's perfect when we talk about those types of things, okay? Oh, people are having trouble seeing this slide. Sorry. Try this again. Sorry, everyone. Is this better? Can everybody see this now?
Yeah.
How about now? I don't know why it keeps going.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can still see it? Okay, thank you. I don't know why it keeps going back to that one. Sorry, everyone. I'm just going to load it up here one more time, and just fire me a note in the chat if you can't see it. All right. Ah, perfect. Here we go. My apologies. So, like I said before, this is really digging in quite a bit, but you can see that they shot 40 on the front nine and 35 on the back nine. You can see if you were to take their efficiency, right? So 8 of the 9 holes, they felt their process was good. On the front nine, it was 7 of 9 holes. They thought their process was good, which is this line right here, right? Most importantly, when you look at this player's notes, right? Missed a putt on 1, bad drive, great bounce back on 4, talked about using his breathing, really process orientated on holes 4 and 5, bad chip on 5. You know, it goes on and on and on. This individual is building identity. Okay. He talked about feeling good after going to hole 10 after being 5 over on the front. That's what I want to hear, right? How many times do you go? You know, if you have a bad front nine, you're increasing the pressure and you're increasing all those types of things moving forward. This is process oriented. Talk about great self-talk. You know, he talks about a technical mistake on 13. We can go back. We'll work on it. We'll get your swing coach to look at that. Okay. One thing that I do want to notice here is he got going pretty good. So he made a bogey here. Sorry, he went bogey, birdie, birdie, bogey, birdie, par, par, and then he just talks about 17 about he just made a push, right? So he went for it, ended up not going the way he wanted to, right? It kind of started to rush a little bit, anxiety, adrenaline, stuff like that, right? But once again, bounce back great on 18. And talking with this individual athlete, a lot of that's based off of how he managed himself through the round. So there's a lot more to this 75 than just a 75, right? When I look at it, you know, on the front nine, he only had a couple 2 reds in his pre-shot where he felt like, but this is all about self-awareness. This is at the end of the hole, instead of just marking a 5 or a 6, it's, I'm going to mark exactly what my process went through. That's hard work. Not everyone does that, right? But that's such a glimpse into the performance and into mentality and understanding what your process actually is. I think sometimes a lot of us talk about process and don't really know how to expand on it, right? So just one, man, lots of struggles navigating here tonight for some reason. So just a last thought here is just you know, this is something that no matter what athlete, golfer, hockey player, saddle bronc rider, whoever I work with, you know, this is about when you're in that moment is how do you reset and reframe, and it's kind of a process about the things that you can control, the aspects that define you. Take a breath and figure out what's important now, right? So after you come off that double bogey, what's important now? What do you need to do to have a good hole? Not make birdie, but what do you need to do to have a good hole? Number 1 priority, maybe get the ball in play or hit the middle of the green if it's a par 3. That's perspective, right? And how are you going to deliver that? It's usually through your breathing and stuff like that. I'm a huge fan of words and making sure you have great words in your vocabulary when you're on the course with yourself. This is an example of Joe Maddon's card, who's the manager of the Cubs when they won after 100 years, and just great acronyms, right? So, you know, DSB, do simple better, right? Stick to the process. Don't worry about results. Be present, not perfect. Just lots of great things there. So I'm going to kind of open it up for some questions, and we'll kind of give it 5 minutes. You can ask a question through the chat. You can take yourself off of mute as well. So I'll leave it open here. Any questions at all? So what I'll do is I'll just say thanks everyone for jumping on. I appreciate it. Hopefully I've given you some ideas to how to deal with those unavoidable aspects that happen, how you manage that stress that's going to naturally happen on a golf course, and using your mental skills to help do that. So remember, process orientated is still a lot of hard work. You can't just say you're process orientated without filling in some of those gaps. So by all means, if you have no questions, please feel free to jump off. If you don't, I'll stick around here for a couple minutes and see if anyone has some questions. So thanks again. So Chris, just about process during the webinar, what do I exactly mean by that, and what does it encompass? You know, it encompasses your pre-shot routine, your in-shot thought process, and then your post-shot routine, and at times what you're doing in between shots as well. And so a lot of that is something that we can gauge, right? If you had a good, you know, if you assess the situation that you're in your pre-shot, winds coming out of the north or whatever the case may be, you can still do a very, very good job of that, and the execution of the shot doesn't go the way you want it. But spending time on knowing that you did a good job in assessing the situation is part of your process. Any other questions? All right. I'm probably going to end the meeting unless I'll give 20 seconds here. There's a few of you still on here. All right. Thanks, everybody.